When most people think about skiing in Northern California, they probably think about Tahoe. But what might be a bit of a surprise is that the Northern Sierras have a ton of mountains outside the Tahoe region, and some of them even have compelling ski resorts of their own. One such mountain is Bear Valley, located off of Highway 4 south of the Tahoe region. So can this lesser-known mountain hold its own against some of the behemoths in Tahoe? Or is there a reason that Bear Valley flies under the radar of so many skiers and riders even in Northern California? Well, in this video, we'll go through Bear Valley's overall mountain experience, and then we'll go through how the resort stacks up in our overall rankings. If you find this information helpful, be sure to like and subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss any of our content. And if you're looking for a crew to visit some of the best destination ski resorts in the United States, Europe, or elsewhere around the world, check out our Peak House trips for the upcoming season. These trips are going to be absolutely sick, and a link to see them all is in the description below. With that all being said, let's jump in. The first thing to note about Bear Valley is its size. The resort offers just over 1,300 skiable acres and 1,900 feet of vertical descent, which is pretty decent for a local ski resort, although it is a step below some of the Tahoe destinations. However, this footprint comes with a huge catch. Over 40% of the resort's terrain lacks direct lift service, so the mountain in practical terms is substantially smaller than its raw footprint would have you believe. In addition, only advanced and expert guests can really take advantage of the resort's full vertical drop, as all of the lift-served beginner and intermediate trails have a vertical descent of less than 1,000 feet, or roughly half of the advertised metric. But despite these caveats, when the mountain is fully open, there is more than enough to keep most guests busy for at least a few days. Bear Valley is divided into 4 major mountain areas, each of which offers a unique experience targeted towards different types of guests. The first 3 are lift-served, while the last one isn't. The front side is all that guests will be able to see when they arrive at the resort, and at a first glance, it makes the resort seem a lot smaller than it really is. The main lodge and parking are located at the base of this area, which is actually well over halfway up the total vertical drop of the resort. In terms of terrain, the front side offers all of the resort's beginner terrain, surrounded by a mix of shorter, intermediate, and advanced runs. Moving to the far skiers left of the resort, Bear West is a mostly intermediate-focused area with longer groomers and gladed runs. The lower mountain, which consists of 2 large bowls known as Snow Valley and Grizzly Bowl, is an entirely advanced and expert-focused area littered with cliffs, ridges, chutes, and endurance runs. The final mountain area, the village side, may be Bear Valley's most unique feature. This large, wide-open, southeast-facing slope lacks lifts entirely, and guests who venture into this area will need to take a bus if they want to get back to the resort. Because of this, very few guests ski or ride the village side, and entering this area often feels like venturing into a backcountry zone, albeit one that's patrolled and maintained for avalanche safety. After navigating through the uncut trees at the bottom of the slopes on the village side, skiers and riders will have to follow a road back to the Bear Valley Village to catch a bus back to the resort. This is easier said than done, as the roads are quite flat and require extensive pushing. It's clear that very few people come back here, as there's little signage. Thankfully, with the exception of the village side, navigating between mountain areas is relatively painless. From the top of the mountain, visitors can access nearly the entire mountain with little to no traversing. In addition, both the front side and Bear West have high-speed lifts running to the peak. One minor point of frustration for some advanced and expert guests is that parts of the lower mountain cannot be accessed directly from the Grizzly Chair, which is the only lift serving that advanced-oriented area. This means that lapping a small selection of trails here, or traveling to Bear West or the village side, requires 2 lift rides. When it comes to navigating between mountain areas, the situation is made more frustrating by the fact that the Grizzly Chair is an old, fixed-grip double lift, which at least as of this past season, is surprisingly common at Bear Valley. In fact, of the resort's 7 chairlifts, 4 have historically been fixed-grip doubles. These chairs have been of an older variety, which tend to sway and bounce. 2 of these have historically served the beginner area and run at a lower speed. Another lift has historically been a fixed-grip triple, but this lift has rarely run, which has left just 2 detachable high-speed lifts as the desirable ones to ride. Thankfully, the resort's 2 high-speed lifts are well placed. Both run from the base of their respective mountain areas to the resort's summit, so many guests will spend an entire day on just these 2 lifts. The out-of-base Mocha Lumne Express is a 6-pack, and on most days, it's likely to be the lift that visitors ride most frequently. Additionally, it's worth noting that many of the drawbacks with Bear Valley's slower chairs are set to be fixed for the upcoming 2024-25 season. The Koala Chair, which is one of the resort's fixed grip doubles, is set to be replaced by a still slow but higher capacity fixed grip quad. Additionally, the Cub Chair is set to be replaced by the underutilized Triple Chair that currently extends further up the mountain. Finally, the Super Cub Chair is set to have its chairs replaced with more modern infrastructure. After these upgrades, the Grizzly Chair will be the resort's only remaining old-style double chair, which should help improve the experience quite a bit. But while its lift infrastructure isn't perfect, and it still might not be fully fixed next year, Bear Valley has a huge advantage over the Tahoe resorts in one respect: its crowds. The resort will often feel empty compared to mountains in Tahoe or other destination ski regions. The only areas likely to see any sort of lines are the bases of the mountain's two high-speed lifts, so the older, slower lifts aren't as much of a problem as they might be at better-known resorts. Even the Grizzly Chair, which is the only way out of a large, steep mountain area, rarely has lift lines at all. This all being said, while the mountain itself may feel empty, the same can't always be said of the mountain's only lift-served lodge. Around lunchtime, finding a place to sit at the base lodge can be a bit of a challenge. In fact, the longest line many guests will experience at Bear Valley is at the lunch line. Bear Valley doesn't have all that much beginner terrain, but at least terrain of this type is easy to access. All of the resort's green trails are in one pod right by the main lodge. Also convenient for beginners is that there is a clear intended order of progression. The Panda Carpet is a tiny bunny hill, and the Cub Chair, which is set to be replaced for the upcoming season with a triple lift, is a relatively short chair with a very mild, consistent slope. The adjacent Super Cub Chair has some slightly steeper sections, more trees, and is right next to the main terrain park, so beginners who want to try something a bit more challenging will get something out of this lift. The whole beginner area is relatively short compared to some destination resorts, but there is enough terrain for first-timers to learn without having to lap the same run too many times. There is technically one more green trail on the village side, but this is nothing more than a traverse between two roads with no lift access. Bear Valley has a lot more to offer for intermediate skiers and riders. Bear West is the most intermediate-focused part of the resort. This area is home to the longest blue trails on the mountain, and there are a good number of groomed ways down and plenty of paths between them. Bear West also hosts some intermediate glades and ungroomed trails. The bottom section is relatively flat, but unless it's a powder day or spring conditions materialize, traversing isn't typically required. There are some worthwhile intermediate trails elsewhere on the upper mountain as well. The Koala Chair is the other largely intermediate-focused lift at Bear Valley, with a mix of groomed and ungroomed blue runs. Most of these runs are fairly short, but there are a variety of pitches and some glades to be found here. When it comes to the main part of the front side, the Mokulumne Express has one main blue run back to the base area, Mokulumne West. However, this run sees a lot of traffic for Bear Valley and contains a fairly steep section that can be a major choke point and a challenge for lower-level intermediates. This run is required for intermediates to return to the front side from Bear West without traversing across to the Koala area of the resort. For more adventurous intermediate skiers who don't mind the bus ride back, there are also two blue trails on the village side, and when they're open, these are the longest blue runs at the resort by a significant margin. Despite its family-friendly footprint, advanced visitors are perhaps the most well catered to at Bear Valley. Guests will find a wide variety of black diamond trails across all major mountain areas. On the front side, advanced terrain consists mostly of relatively short but steep drops, some of which are often groomed. Adventurous guests will also find some cliffs scattered around this area, providing an extra challenge, as well as a few steep gladed areas. Bear West has less advanced terrain than the front side does, but it does have some of the resort's best advanced glades. But where advanced skiers and riders will undoubtedly want to spend most of their time is in the lower mountain. This area is split into two large bowls, Snow Valley and Grizzly Bowl, totaling over 300 acres of advanced and expert terrain. The main run down Snow Valley is sometimes groomed, but the rest of the lower mountain is over 1,100 vertical feet of ungroomed, leg-burning terrain. The village side is also mostly geared towards advanced guests, though due to the time and hassle required to return to the resort, it's unlikely that guests will ski this area more than once or twice in a day, if that. Still, when conditions are right, those who do venture into this area are unlikely to be disappointed, as most routes down will provide quite a few isolated turns with some of the resort's best views, though the actual challenge level of skiing here is relatively low compared to the resort's other single blacks. Even for experts, Bear Valley fares better than it may appear on paper. The resort only has 4 double black trails on the trail map, all of which are in the lower mountain, but all 4 of these runs provide a legitimate challenge. West Ridge, which is one of the parts of Grizzly Bowl that requires 2 lift rides to lap, contains the mountain's gnarliest terrain, with a multitude of unmarked chutes and cliffs to be found in the area. There are also plenty of cliffs to be found around other parts of the lower mountain and even the front side, which provide expert-level challenges that are not marked on the trail map. Finally, it's worth noting that Bear Valley is somewhat more conservative than many ski areas with its trail ratings, and some of the single black runs here would probably be marked as double blacks at many competing mountains. While Bear Valley may not attract professional freestyle skiers and riders, it does maintain several terrain parks on the front side of the mountain. The Cub Park offers several small features and is a good spot for beginners to practice, while the Rodeo Park has several larger jumps and a few rails, boxes, and tubes as well. The Rodeo Park is directly adjacent to the Super Cub chair, so beginners in this area can get up-close views of some pretty neat tricks. When it comes to snow, Bear Valley's experience is generally in line with what one might expect from a Northern California ski resort. However, the overall quality is a bit of a mixed bag. On the plus side, thanks to its low crowds, Bear Valley tends to preserve snow a lot better than many of its Tahoe competitors. Those who know where to look may find fresh powder even days after a storm. That being said, due to the mountain's decidedly unique layout, snow conditions can vary drastically across different mountain areas. The frontside and Bear West have favorable exposure angles and are relatively high in elevation and thus tend to preserve snow quite well. The lower mountain, however, may see rain in warmer storms, and when it does get powder, the conditions may not stay consistent when temperatures rise. The sun-baked slopes of the village side are definitely the least reliable. These south and east-facing trails are often icy and slushy, even when the rest of the resort might still be powdery. As far as its actual snowfall totals go, Bear Valley sees the strong accumulation one might expect from a Sierra Nevada resort, with approximately 300 inches of average annual snowfall. However, snow totals do tend to underperform the Tahoe Mountains by around 10 to 20%. Bear Valley's wildly variable snowfall patterns should be no surprise to those familiar with the area. Like other Northern California resorts, Bear Valley can see anything from massive snowfall events that can shut down the resort, to multi-week snow droughts, to low-elevation rain. Unfortunately, guests planning an in-advance trip to Bear Valley have no guarantee of actually being able to ski all of the resort's best terrain, with the infamous weather patterns causing substantial operational impacts at times. The frontside and Bear West are reasonably reliable thanks to snowmaking and their higher elevations, but the lower mountain may not open at all until fairly late in the season, and it can take several days or even weeks after particularly large storm events for the resort to open this area due to limited ops team capacity. This all being said, it is worth noting that Bear Valley changed ownership for the 2023-24 season, and the new owners have acknowledged the inconsistency in the lower mountain's opening schedule and promised to make this terrain a top priority for the upcoming 2024-25 season. In a recent statement, the resort claims that upgrades being made during the off-season will allow them to open and groom the lower mountain with a quarter of the amount of snow currently required. If this is true, this would largely address Bear Valley's biggest weakness for advanced visitors. But even if half the mountain is closed, one area in which Bear Valley does stand out is in its views. The resort is surrounded by beautiful mountains in every direction, and each individual mountain area provides guests with unique views of different mountains and ranges. Bear Valley sits on the edge of a canyon lined with prominent mountains, including Mokelumne Peak and, further north, even the backside of Kirkwood. From the resort's upper ridgelines in the village side, guests will have views of the Dardanelles and other impressive peaks further southeast. It's also worth mentioning that the only small town near the mountain is tucked out of sight from most of the resort, which results in a very isolated feel. For the most part, the topography of Bear Valley itself is not quite as impressive as many destination resorts in California, though the Grizzly Bowl does have some impressive cliffs and walls. When it comes to facilities, Bear Valley has anything visitors might need, but it's not going to blow anyone away. The main base lodge has a reasonably large cafeteria, several rooms worth of seating, a small shop, and 2 bars. However, the building itself is nothing impressive, and as we previously mentioned, it lacks capacity during peak times. Besides the main lodge, there are very few other facilities worth mentioning. Atop the summit, there is a small shack which sometimes serves lunch or drink options, although there's no option to actually enter this small building. If you happen to go on a spring weekend, the resort also sometimes offers barbecue lunches outside the main lodge. There is another lodge in the Bear Valley Village with more food and shopping options, but only skiers and riders who venture into the village side and therefore need to take a bus back to the main mountain are likely to even see this building. When it comes to getting to Bear Valley, the resort is about 3.5 hours from San Francisco, which is comparable to most of its Tahoe competitors. The resort is also roughly 2.5 hours from Sacramento and 2 hours from Stockton. California Highway 4 is reasonably reliable in all but the very largest of storms, but it's closed just east of Bear Valley during the winter, so visitors coming from Nevada have no easy access. Traffic is rarely a major issue, with perhaps the exception of some major holidays, and even then, visitors will have a much easier time avoiding traffic compared to the resort's better-known Tahoe competitors. Bear Valley's parking lot is essentially just the widened-out terminal portion of Highway 207, the access road to the resort. This means that the lot can basically extend as far as it needs to based on crowds, but on busy weekends and holidays, some visitors may have to walk a ways or hop on a shuttle to get to the slopes. On weekends, holidays, and peak days, the resort implements a preferred parking system for the spots closest to the lodge, but the majority of parking is always free. When it comes to staying on site, the closest lodging to Bear Valley is in the Bear Valley Village, from which a shuttle ride is needed to access the ski area. The Bear Valley Lodge is the main option here, and while it may not impress those accustomed to slopeside lodging at destination resorts, it does provide a comfy place to stay, with a more laid-back feel and a large rock fireplace lounge room to relax after a long day on the slopes. Because of the lack of lifts on the village side, accommodations in the Bear Valley Village are technically ski-in when conditions allow, but not ski-out. As a more family-oriented resort than some of the ones in the Tahoe region, Bear Valley's après-ski scene can best be described as laid-back. There are several bars in the main lodge and a few more in the village, but guests will want to drive back down the mountain to really find restaurants and bars with an après experience. So while there's no denying that Bear Valley lacks the infrastructure to fully compete with the bigger resorts elsewhere in the Sierras, its diverse terrain, strong natural snowfall, family-friendly atmosphere, and unique mountain aesthetic result in a compelling option for those looking to avoid the hassle associated with the more well-known ski destinations. Combined with its lack of crowds and limited media attention, there's no wonder the resort has attracted somewhat of a cult following over the years. So Bear Valley might be a lower-key alternative to the resorts in Tahoe, but what's the cost of entry? Well, lift ticket prices undercut many of the more well-known California resorts, but they're still pretty expensive, with adult lift tickets costing $135 on weekdays and $155 on weekends and holidays. While Bear Valley is on neither Epic nor Icon, the resort is also on the Cali Pass, a season pass which also grants unrestricted access to Dodge Ridge, China Peak, and Mountain High, as well as 3 days each at 19 resorts on the Powder Alliance partnership. If you can make proper use of the Cali Pass, it's probably the best value way to access the resort. Now let's go through how Bear Valley stacks up in our overall rankings, which are determined by the following 10-category mountain score. Bear Valley sees nearly as impressive snow totals as its Tahoe competitors further north, with some notable powder days throughout the year, and the resort gets a 7 for snow. Bear Valley has some snowmaking and grooming measures, but its lower mountain areas, at least as of this past season, suffer from inconsistent opening schedules, and the resort gets a 4 for resiliency. Bear Valley claims a 1,680-acre footprint, but based on our measurements, only 1,329 of these acres are skiable, and the resort gets a 6 for size. Bear Valley may not have the longest runs out there, but its footprint offers a strong variety of terrain for visitors intermediate and up, and the resort gets a 6 for terrain diversity. Despite coming across as pretty family-friendly, Bear Valley has some surprisingly gnarly expert features, especially in lower mountain areas, and the resort gets an 8 for challenge. Bear Valley has a mix of high-speed and fixed-grip chairlifts. However, the village side, which makes up over 40% of its terrain footprint, requires a bus to get back, and the resort gets a 4 for lifts. Bear Valley can see moderate lines during the busiest times, but crowds are never as big of an issue as at the Tahoe Mountains, and the resort gets an 8 for crowd flow. Bear Valley has a base lodge and an upper mountain food shack, but the main lodge could use a facelift and some more space, and the resort gets a 5 for facilities. Unless you're trying to get to the bus-served village side, getting around to Bear Valley is pretty straightforward, and the resort gets a 7 for navigation. And finally, mountain aesthetic. Despite its modest vertical drop, Bear Valley's isolated and distinctive location furnishes it with some incredible views. Combined with the often sunny footprint, the resort offers an impressive vibe for a mountain of its size and gets an 8 in this category. These categories add up to an overall score of 63, placing Bear Valley 7th amongst California and Tahoe resorts as of mid-2024. For a mountain that's flown so far under the radar, Bear Valley puts up a surprisingly strong fight against the more locally operated Tahoe ski resorts such as Mount Rose and Sugar Bowl, but the resort could do an even better job if it weren't for its outdated infrastructure and lack of lift service to such a substantial portion of its footprint. Bear Valley does look to be addressing some of its biggest resiliency and lift network issues over the next year, so we'll be on the lookout to see if its changes shake up the California resort scene. For more information on Bear Valley and over 100 destination ski resorts, check out peakrankings.com. See you for the next one.